Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. I'm Morgan McClintock, the CEO of startup marketing agency Firebrand. We've launched this podcast to interview the best in the business, but I'm not going to do it alone. So please meet my co-hosts.
I'm Nicole Pytel, Firebrand's VP of Content Marketing.
And I'm Chris Ulbrich, Firebrand's Head of Media Relations.
I'm Ian Lipner, a tech PR and crisis communications veteran.
We'll drop a new episode each week, so there's plenty of fuel for your marketing fire. Get the spark you need to take your startup to a whole new level. Hello and welcome to Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintock and I'm joined today by my co-host Ian Lipner.
Hey Morgan, how you doing today?
I'm really good. So today we're going to talk about building a community.
Yes, I want to know, how do you do it? How do you keep it going? How do you know it's even a community? And we have a special guest who is going to tell us about all of this.
Today we're joined by Nuri Djavit, and he is a seasoned marketing leader with a solid track record spanning technology, media, consumer brands across diverse markets, from startups to scaled organizations. He really specializes in brand experience that drive engagement and trust and measurable business success. He is a recovering engineer with a build anything attitude. And he's also the father of two wonderful young ladies. He's addicted to music and the great outdoors, and he's obsessed with Greek mythology and philosophy, which we'll talk about in a minute. But specifically as pertains to building a community, Nuri was a CMO at Singularity University, which had 300,000 members as a community. He's currently the CXO at EMOTIV, which is a neuroscience, an AI-powered neuroscience company, which also has a large community. So Nuri Djavit, welcome to Fired Up.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Humbled.
Humbled, indeed. Well, it's great to have you. And so we want to talk about building a community, because I think this is a hot area when it comes to building a company and marketing in particular. I mean, you look at types of communities, whether they're sort of content-oriented communities, like a SaaStr or maybe Pivot, and Pivot's got its conference, or the All In, and All In guys have got their conference, or whether it's you're an open source company and you've got your own community that's building the product or helping build the product. Or even on the consumer side, like, you know, I use Peloton. They're always telling me that we're part of a community, even though I really feel like I'm the only one sweating away on that bike. They all want to kind of have a community. And, you know, in an age of AI where we're going to have more content and maybe performance of other marketing is going to be impacted, having a community could be a real sort of critical factor in the growth of a company. So just to sort of back up and start with an obvious question, what's the difference between having an audience where I just broadcast all my stuff and actually having a community?
Sounds painfully obvious, as you suggested, but it seems to be that one is passive and one is active. When you talk about growth, you want passionate fans of your brand. You want to achieve brand attachment. One of the ways to measure that, of course, is how active your customers are, whether they're prospects or current customers or past customers. I think how active they are, how they're involved with your brand and whatever touch points is clutch to building that sort of advocacy. So I think, simply put, passive audience, active community.
Yeah, I think most brands are pretty happy with having an audience and building that, where there's, like I say, they're sort of broadcasting their message. But having a community where those members actually have to interact a little bit is a lot harder to do, and we'll go into how. But what are the benefits of sort of taking that extra step and building a community, and why would I want to do that?
Think again, I'll use this term brand attachment, which I think is a bit more than just brand love. You're sort of attached to a brand out of necessity, need, desire, respect, trust, and all the benefits that will give you, loyalty, premium pricing. it's important in B2B particularly because 95% of your audience, go back to audience, are not in the market to buy your stuff at the time that you're trying to sell it. So you have to build a relationship. How do you build that relationship? And it's a multimodal approach. We talk a lot about prediction. Well, the way to have greater access to your audience, to have greater prediction, to make conversion when conversion is appropriate, i.e. that 5% of the time when they are ready to buy, then having an active community will give you those things. It will give you greater prediction, give you greater access, more eyeballs. They'll pay attention more. I mean, we all know we've spent a lot of time in digital, so we know about the big lie about programmatic media and build for advertisements. So impressions and eyeballs, these things are really starting to matter a lot less. If you think even about how platforms like HubSpot will automate a lead to an MQL, it's on engagement. It's not a panacea. You kind of need to be careful about that, and you often need manual intervention. But the measures are largely on how much and how frequently your community is interacting with your brand. That there is the qualification for an MQL and then into SQL. It matters a lot. And of course, how you define community yourself, what that really, really means for your business. It's long term, and a lot of people want short term gain. This is why digital won during the 2000s. I could push a button and within 24 hours, I would have bare minimum leading indicators. And a lot of community, a lot of creative, a lot of brand work pays off over months, if not years. But if you only plan for tomorrow, what happens next week? What happens next year? You're in a constant feast and famine. With an engaged community, like I said, you have predictability, you have loyalty, you have lower cost of conversion, and you have amazing byproducts like market research, product development, product research, as we just talked about before the call started, EMOTIV, and how that community has built apps, unlocked new ideas beyond what EMOTIV themselves could possibly dream. So your community, there are second order effects of having a community beyond the financial.
Yeah, so a motive obviously leads a community and has gathered the largest trove of brain data in the world through that community. And it took time, though, right? And you pointed out that this is a long-term effort. You don't get that sort of instant dopamine hit looking at the dashboard that you do from some forms of marketing. Some brands might say, well, I don't know if I have time, or I don't know if I have the resources to do that. How can you tell what are the ingredients that you need to be successful creating a community, and who shouldn't try to?
The community has to have purpose. And just like your product needs good product market fit, the community needs to have good product market fit. It has to have a reason to exist, and it has to have value differentiators. It has to offer the community something. What does that community get in return? Now, sometimes it's simply that you're giving them a voice, you're giving them a platform, right? And that can be very, very noble, especially if you're a virtuous company like EMOTIV, who is trying to leave an impression, create an impact on brain health globally, right? In democratizing or increasing access to this technology. So it's very virtuous. So the contribution from the community is one way. It's a bit like citizen journalism, right? I'm able to do this, and I have a voice. I have an idea, and I can quickly build something and contribute. And you see this with open code repositories, people contributing. I think you see this with people like Apple as well in their community. So I think purpose matters, not just for the brand, but for the individuals. The connection of the cohort matters. And I want to be really careful about leaning into demographics, because I think demographics is a useful layer, but should never be the sole strategy for defining anything. The cohort can be combined in purpose, in process and conversation, but how you bring that cohort together. So more is not necessarily more in a community. So quality matters. So who you bring together, how you bring them together, and why you bring them together, I think are maybe the three key components. And I think you need a really robust methodology for keeping the community active and incentivized. So just like you would have a really great facilitator at a conference or at a corporate dinner, you should have really great facilitators amongst the community.
That makes a lot of sense. You got to know about who needs you to do this. What are they looking to get from the community? And you've got to know why you're doing it. So Nuri, tell us, how do you do it? How do you even go about starting a community? How do you build it in a way that is sustainable?
First, with a heck of a lot of patience. This is a long-term play, so you need to manage expectations in the organization. That patience, I guess, relies on having a fairly robust long-term plan with what the short terms are. So you kind of have to imagine, sure, you want a community of 100,000 people, 1 million people, or whatever it is. I'll go back to something I did say on the previous question. It's quality matters. So you should focus on quality versus quantity. I mean, there is a tipping point, of course. It's like anything. If you walk into a seminar and there's 10 people in an auditorium that has a capacity of 1,000, you naturally feel it's lower quality, right? It's not great. If it's brimming, you'll forgive the speaker, probably give them a heck of a lot of latitude because it's packed, and you'll think, oh, this must be valuable. So you need a certain quantity, of course, for it simply to feel valuable and be valuable. But you kind of need to chunk it down into epochs. Yeah, what does it look like? If our goal is 100,000 people globally or 1 million or whatever it is, what value am I getting? What are we doing when we're only 200, 500? So you need to have this sort of plan where your community changes over time. And of course, what you do when you're 100 or 200 people, you're highly accountable to one another. Everyone knows each other. That changes dramatically when you're 100,000. You don't know everybody. So your behaviors in managing the community change dramatically. So what is the goal? What is the vision for this? What is the value in having this community? What do I want? First order effect, second order, third order, all of that. And then, what does it mean? The first quarter, the first 6 months, the first year of building this community. It's not going to happen overnight, and you're not going to get the results overnight. As long as you appreciate that it's going to be long-term and you've decided what the community looks like in these defined epochs, then that's the first thing, is patience and planning and understanding what it looks like at different points. Within that planning, of course, is how you staff it and how you constantly provide value. This is the same with product. Every month, every quarter, you should be analyzing your product and your value differentiators, including your unfair advantage. You should be testing it, right? We're living in a world where innovation is happening at an incredible pace, especially with AI. The research you did on your product 6 months ago may be irrelevant today. So you have to be constantly testing that. It's the same with the community. It's constantly testing what value you're providing and making sure. So you have to have a data plan. You're constantly drawing insights from this community and pivoting as you need. This sort of wraps into the staffing of it, and you can have a dedicated team. But I think the other thing you should do early on is make sure that you have involvement from key players in the company, especially when you're a startup, but even for larger scale organizations. People want to hear, if they can, from Reid Hoffman. And at Singularity, it was Peter Diamandis. If you had Peter in an online community event, the attendance would be tenfold. If it was Ray Kurzweil, it would be 20 times. You want to make sure that you've got not just buy-in for the program from your leadership, but you actually have committed time from them. These are the people who the community, I think, really, really want to hear from. And I would also lean on another concept, and I think this might be a Simon Sinek quote. You can't expect your audience to love you if your company doesn't love you first. Right? Love the brand. So you need to have that passion from within. So no, you don't want everyone working 24/7. That would be unreasonable. But I do believe that a high degree of involvement from the team, whether it's engineers or researchers, whether it's the executive suite. I think that involvement really matters because it demonstrates the investment as well and increases the value perception and the value itself.
So what I'm hearing is think about the long term, think about your community, what the mission is and what the members of that community are going to get from it. So it might be we're going to build this piece of software. It might be we're going to have this platform. We're going to achieve this higher order mission that you talked about from EMOTIV. It might be, hey, I'm just going to get to meet some cool people and build my own personal career. I'm going to get to learn something from others. And then sort of think about the different stages of it and the differentiated. I like the fact that you said, okay, there are lots of communities out there and you're really in a war for attention of people's time. You know, they could be watching YouTube instead of doing this. You've got to compete at that higher level for all sorts of different things. What makes yours different in the same way, at the same kind of level that you think about what makes my product different? And that might change over time and at different levels of, because I've got a community of 50 people, we meet and we sort of talk about, and it's very open to talk about different issues compared to 500 people where, the ties start to be looser. But you made an important point there, like not every company has a Peter Diamandis, a Ray Kurzweil, who can be that sort of talismanic person who people want to be near because of their career and who they are. Do you need that person, or can you build a community without the central leader?
I think the first example, and I apologize if I reference them too often, but Apple's community. I don't think Steve Jobs ever said anything on their community. And actually the heroes of that community was the community itself.
Right.
I think one of the great successes has been that you'll see someone post a problem, and it might be a developer's problem, some code, and they're developing a QuickTime streaming codec. It might be a customer simply trying to figure out, why does iTunes on my phone constantly play in random? I didn't set it to random. It randomizes all my albums. What you'll find is that the answers come from the community. Yeah. And every now and then you'll see someone from Apple to say, oh, good, I see that, N_Djavit 70 answered your question. It seems like you're all good. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Rarely is it the Apple people answering the questions. So the heroes there are the community themselves. So I think this is an important point. So yes, relying on an iconoclast like a Diamandis or a Kurzweil is amazing, but it's dangerous because they become single points of failure. But it also matters, context matters. What is your brand? And the Singularity brand still is very much Peter and Ray. And you see this in the community. They want Ray probably beyond his natural life. Very compelling reason to build a digital twin of Ray Kurzweil.
Yes.
But I think the context matters. So it might be, I think in an EMOTIV, Tan has developed sort of minor iconoclast status. She's spoken at TED. She's a very compelling leader. She's got an incredible story. But actually, I look at EMOTIV and I think about the neuroscientists in the company. I think about the engineers in the company. When I look at the community is an active community looking to advance research or build stuff. So for them, I think it's the people who could give them help, the inside track, how-tos. Whilst it's very accessible technology, it still is complex. So I think the context really, really matters. I think you look at some larger tech organizations like Ultrix, in their community, the heroes are the engineers. They're helping to ensure adoption of their technology. They're helping to advance productivity through their tool set. So it's the engineers or the sales engineers who are often the heroes, not this sort of visionary leader. I think you have to make sure that you understand the context and really what the incentives of the audience, of the community are likely to be.
You point out how important it is to empower these brand advocates, but, it is a brand. You also have to protect your brand. So how do you establish and enforce rules, standards, maybe even culture for a community?
And this was something we discussed at length at Singularity. And there was actually a point where our online community had grown pretty big. It hadn't lost its purpose, but the purpose was getting smothered because the quality of the community had changed. The people who were in it, I don't want to say they were low quality, but they were low quality in terms of what the mission of the community was. So one of the things we did was, yes, we had a sort of modus operandi, but we refreshed it and then we reinforced it. We took the difficult decision of actually culling people who were not contributing in a valuable way to the community and therefore reducing its overall quality. We were seeing attrition of good people because we were diluting. You never want to go into a meeting with your boss and say, yeah, we built the community to 250,000 people and now it's 100. Oh my God, I'm investing all this money. Why is it now we culled? Because we've gotten addicted to this volume machine, right? Billions of impressions, click-throughs, even though half of them are mistakes. It's the volume. Part of this is an overall culture change, and it goes back to what I said earlier, is that you have to set expectations and get executive buy-in early and to state, we are going to go after quality. These are the measures we're going after. We would like to have a soft goal is X thousands of people, but that matters less than engagement and activation. So I think setting the expectations early, getting buy-in early and repeating those often, because the muscle will be to draw back to the overall size of the community constantly. But yeah, so I think creating sort of corporate values, the modus operandi, what the community values are, and sticking to them, repeating them back to the community, even explaining when you cull, if you have to cull people, explaining that to them. I think at the end of the day, no one likes to be booted out off the island, but explaining why matters. That's crucial. Then making sure you have the right sort of ability to measure, not just quantitatively, but qualitatively, so the nuanced conversation. As you get into tens and hundreds of thousands of people, it becomes more difficult to monitor manually. You've got to make sure that you're able to zero in on problematic areas. AI is very useful here, but disambiguation engines are still relatively nascent. So measurement and monitoring are key. And then the humans behind it who are passionately committed to the mission of the community. Culling the audience is the last thing you want to do. So course correcting is the skill of a great community manager or managers. So I think, again, going back to this staffing, I think that really, really matters. And I think steering people is not just the community management, but it's also, again, coming back to this idea of leadership involvement in the community of other people in the company.
I want to talk about monetization of this community. You've got to invest resources in building it. It's got to have its own mission. It's got to have rules of engagement and a plan for different levels. It's got to be differentiated, etc. It's almost like if I'm thinking about a software company and I'm building my community around that, like it's an adjacent business in many ways. Should I be thinking about monetizing it? Like, how do I monetize it? Is it through ticket sales or membership or advertising or what have you? Or should I be monetizing it through the sale of my software? How do I think about, okay, we've got our mission, but like, how do I think about the monetization of the overall community?
I can hear Peter Drucker in the back of my head. Create incredible customer value and the money will come. I think the job of a community is creating incredible value. This is a vehicle where you have this ability to create a relationship with your customer, whether they're, again, a prospect, a pre-customer, current customer, post-customer. So I think the focus on customer value matters most. Secondary KPIs around financial realization of the investment, great. But again, you notice I said secondary. Sure, you want to measure how you're converting. But I think this is a sort of an LTV over CAC conversation. what is the lifetime value of this customer versus a customer who's not in the community? Again, going back to this idea of long term, how do you prove out the value of this individual and this cohort over time? It might be directly because they're buying your technology, they are a customer. It might be that they're ambassadors for your brand and in turn helping to bring in, well, again, depends what the mission of the community is, but there's second order effects, the data you can get, the product development. Sorry, to go back to Apple, I'm a beta developer, so I always have the beta software of iOS and the desktop. It's annoying because it's glitchy at times, but I feel like I'm really part of something, even when I'm not talking to someone. I know that I'm contributing. That I don't know how Apple quantifies the success of their communities, but I doubt monetization is the primary one. I would say that research data, research product development are the primary, and then they're probably looking again at loyalty. Again, depending on what you are, there's going to be so many tactics. And you notice when you were talking about what would it take to build a successful community, I didn't talk about incentives. Sure, you can then say you have early access to software, you have priority access, you have lower cost access. You can give all these incentives that encourage continued participation, continued purchasing. I think the focus has to be on increasing customer value as a proxy for creating greater financial value over time.
You've talked a little bit about having your leaders be involved, especially those that people particularly admire. You talk about delivering incentives in order to drive engagement. What are some of the other things that you've done? Maybe it's across different experiences or specifically at Singularity University that have been great and have really driven engagement, and maybe tell us a little bit about a few that disappointed.
One of the most powerful tools right now, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, is actually to give people a voice. There was research done out of the UK, I think it was the Telegraph, it might have been the Financial Times. They did a story on a study of L&D, learning and development professionals in the enterprise. And the overwhelming response was that they want learning and development to be participatory. They no longer want passive, sit in front of a screen and sit in a conference room and be talked to. They want their team, they want their people to be able to talk, to ask questions, to voice opinions, to express themselves, to contribute, to develop. It's got to be participatory. To me, that contributes to this idea that people want a voice. I mean, you just look at the success of something like TikTok and you can say, yes, social media is problematic in terms of propaganda, misinformation and everything else. But you think about the creators. There's some very clever people who are doing awesome stuff who are on a par with creators in Hollywood, I think. And the engagement proves it. There was a study done recently amongst young people, and they were basically offered, you can have every streaming service, every cable service forever for free, but you have to give up TikTok. Or you can have TikTok and you have to give up every streaming service, every TV. But 70% of young people said, oh, I'll take TikTok. So there's this voice out there, this latent demand on express. And I would argue that there are, talking about a company like EMOTIV or pretty much anyone who's emerging tech, there's going to be people who have a voice. I think you are successful when you create a platform for people to express themselves. Twitter certainly built a success around that. But more importantly around productivity is giving people a platform to express ideas and even prototypes or code modules or whatever it is. Contribution, I'll use that term. I think when you can give people the power to contribute, you're giving them a voice, you're giving them power. So any activation that has included that has been pretty successful wherever I've been. Any activation that's been passive, so we do a community event and it's some expert and sits on a webinar and talks at a big audience, has largely been a failure, unless it's an iconoclast. someone who people are really happy to sit glued to the screen and listen to their every word. But that's rare, right? It's extraordinarily rare. And even with them, after 20 minutes, the attention waves and you see people dropping off webinars. So I think inclusion, participation, contribution equals success.
Right. So if I'm trying to drive it, engagement, I need to have something that people can participate in rather than just watch. And that's going to be the thing that keeps my community alive. It's one thing to create it and sort of get it going. They can atrophy. But to your point about, hey, we're competing with TikTok or YouTube or any number of other things, other communities. Yeah, this community's got a vision, but there are lots of communities with great visions. There are lots of, causes that people could contribute their time. There's lots of opportunities to raise our awareness. What are the things that you think help a community really stand out? Does it all come down to that vision? Like if I think about Singularity, I can go to Singularity and learn a lot of stuff. I can go to TED and learn a lot of stuff. There's a lot of great stuff in both of those communities. How do you make one stand out from the other?
This may sound a little pretentious, but I think if you give it such leadership and vision and you turn it into a movement,
right? I
think that stands out significantly. I think, and I'm thinking in terms of virtuous brands, virtuous organizations. Just because my most recent experiences have been with virtuous organizations wanting to leave a positive impact on the world. But I think that's it. If you create a movement, it can be purely commercial as well towards a common goal. I think you're seeing this with OpenAI, this movement around the builder, the hacker community around OpenAI is phenomenal, right? And now with the announcement of the apps world, but even previous to that, everyone was creating interfaces using chat, building AIs within OpenAI. I mean, Scott Galloway has a marketing expert AI, right? You can ask Scott's digital twin all sorts of questions, and it's ChatGPT that's been trained on all of the data around Scott Galloway. Creating a movement where the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. It's a little, maybe a little high-minded or ambiguous, but I think that's it. When you feel that there is a synergy where all of these many, many different viewpoints and ideas and everything else is starting to synthesize around common themes and common goals, I think that's when it really starts to stand out. Because then people suddenly start to have FOMO. They don't want to not be there.
You mentioned AI as forming its own community now, at least Gen AI. How is AI going to impact the community space? Is it going to challenge or enhance authenticity?
As a productivity tool, it's going to help community managers massively. Disambiguation has been problematic in the last 15 years, right? It's very, very difficult, especially in the English language, which you can use, right? Shit can mean something good. The shit, right? Or it's shit. In the English language is problematic. AI, you're already seeing this, right? There are companies who have customer service co-pilots. So when you're on a customer service call, the AI is feeding you sort of ideas that it's reading between the lines of the customer's conversation. So I think community managers, will very quickly have access to tools that will help their productivity, help keep the community moving in a certain direction around, keep it aligned to its values and everything else. So I think productivity will be huge in terms of building upon key people as well, whether it's an iconoclast and you have a digital twin of a Kurzweil, or whether you're building volume around the engineers in your organization who should be part of the community, or the thought leaders, or whoever else. So I think it can increase quality as well as quantity. Well deployed communities may be amongst the first to fully benefit from AI, as long as we're not looking to replace the humans, we're looking to augment the humans in the community.
I love that. If you're managing a large community, it's hard to look into what is being said and to make sure that you can moderate that. So Gen AI can accelerate that by providing more context to what's being said so that people who are content moderators can focus their attention. But then equally, the leaders, you had said in the pre-show, you've got to kind of lead from the middle. The leaders who are in there sort of injecting the new thoughts and helping sort of energize the community, you can leverage them up a bit more because those people are often very in demand, particularly, hey, so this is a community around my business that we've also got to run the business. By using AI, I can actually leverage them up a bit more and increase the surface area, more content coming out of them more easily so that you can actually get more into inject more pace into the community. So I think those two things those are really good terms. Do you have any other thoughts about, for startups, thinking about a community, already managing a community that they want to take to the next level?
If you're thinking about starting one, and this might be super obvious or perfunctory, the mistake that Singularity made when it first started to convene its community online was to pick a platform and build new, effectively, right? Bring people into a new platform. When we have, sometimes they're not appropriate, but we have really, really good tools to launch a community. Slack now offers incredibly powerful tools to build a community. And Slack is a pretty pervasive tool. It might be that your community is on TikTok. Your community is quite a broad audience. Facebook first started doing this, right, with Facebook groups many, many years ago. So I think you have to think carefully about, again, context matters. Where is the community right now? Does it make sense for us to launch a community over here, or does it make sense to launch a community where they are? The biggest threat to technology is adoption, right? So you want to remove the friction at the beginning as much as possible. You have to have a proper staffing plan. Too many startups just think that it's something that marketing can do, the social media person could do. They cannot. Many have already thought about social media as community management. That's a good first step. But I think you have to think about staffing it and investing in it properly. Build a proper plan, understand the investment, manage your expectations. And again, success is going to depend, this is sort of change management principles, is to make sure that everyone has buy-in and that you are not expecting a return on investment next month the way you might do injecting 50 grand into Google search. If you have a community and looking to expand it, then I would think about making sure that you have regular touch points to determine what's going on, what are the data, what are the insights, what is the value that you're bringing, and be ready to treat it like a product. Be ready to pivot because it is a product. It's a very, very powerful product. Your website is a product. If you're e-commerce, it's certainly a product and is treated that way. You have an entire team managing e-commerce. The community should be the same. So there should be regular intervals where you're really interrogating it and saying, well, where else are people? Is there competition? Is there distraction? We're fighting every moment for people's attention. Are we doing it appropriately? Are we providing the right incentives to participate, the right voice? So I think making sure that you have a rigorous and honest review cycle, I think, is clutch, and revisit your strategy. What was your vision 6 months ago may have changed.
Go where the people are, using the tools that they use as a default if you can. Make sure you're staffing it properly and taking this as a serious endeavor. It might leverage the social media team, but it will need more than those skills, and assess the performance of it competitively, so regularly, so you're constantly adding value. And if you do those things, then you should be able to start, build, and scale your community in 2024. Okay.
And focus on customer value. This is the principal reason, I believe, for community, and make sure that you constantly document and measure first, second, third order effects of your community. Once they have a certain scale and quality, communities are powerful tools to extract value from and inject value in.
Good long-term investment, but certainly pays off for those that
it's frightening these days, right? To say this will pay off in 24 months, or it will start to pay off in 24 months. No one wants to hear that, but we must.
That's the kind of time frame that people need to have in mind.
This is proving out with performance media as well. Everyone's starting to realise that brand and storytelling and emotional connections with the brand actually matter, and it takes a long time to build that.
Brand.
Oh, okay. Otherwise, we would just continuing to spend more and more and more and more and more on Google and Facebook and expecting increasing optimization constantly with just iterative, whatever the algorithms are telling us. So we're starting to realize that actually long-term strategies, what we do that will impact next year, is starting to matter again. So I'm enjoying seeing the reinvestment in radical creativity. Communities I put in the same bucket as long-term brand initiatives.
Absolutely. And in the face of increasing paid media costs and in the face of more AI content, this is definitely a long-term serious play in terms of building brand affinity. I think that's great. Our next section is called Smart People, Dumb Questions, in which we literally pull questions out of a bag. And so these are more personal questions. Now, you said at the top of the show that you're into ancient Greek mythology. So out of the bag, first up is, what is your favorite ancient Greek character?
Prometheus.
Ooh. Why?
The bad boy. I love the story of Prometheus. I love that him and his brother spent more time amongst humans than they did, amongst the gods and the titans, that they were constantly helping humans, teaching them new things, right? And at the first point, humanity was all male, right? Zeus hadn't introduced a female yet, or maybe that was Hera wouldn't allow Zeus to do that, knowing that he was such a dirty bugger.
Yeah.
But I love this idea that he had this love for humanity and this humility and wanted humanity to succeed without the gods. He didn't agree, didn't align with this sort of idea that humans should bow and buckle in the presence of the gods, fear the gods. And this took him to the ultimate expression of this, where Zeus had said was unequivocal. No, we will not give mankind fire. And he went and did it anyway. And then, of course, that marked the beginning of the end of the gods. Once humans could forge, could cook, could create, then the gods mattered less. He did what was best for mankind against his own benefit, his own personal interests. And of course he suffered, right? He was pegged to a rock for 1,000 years, where a vulture came down and pecked out his liver every day.
For 1,000 years. That doesn't sound great. But a good reason, and thanks to Prometheus, we can cook. And that rather leads me to the next question out here. What's the oddest thing that you've ever eaten? And I have a feeling that this might be good.
So my dad is from Cyprus.
Right.
Colourful island, right, that's been owned by everyone from the Mycenaeans to the British, and back into the hands of the locals. Late night, me and some cousins went to eat lahmacun, which is, I believe it's Lebanese. It's like a Middle Eastern kind of pizza. It's a very, very thin flatbread with ground meat on it and spice. It's amazing. With it, there was this one special place that was kind of like off the beaten track, was sheep's head soup. So you have the lahmacun, which is amazing, and sheep's head soup. And when I say sheep's head, they literally throw in the head with the eyeballs, the brain, everything.
Like something out of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Totally. So I get served up, and I get served up an eyeball, and my cousin, who's a very good actor, says, "Oh my God, that's amazing luck." And you can't offend them by not eating. So I ate a sheep's eyeball. He was having me on, of course. You're supposed to push that to the side and not eat it.
That's brilliant.
That was the
Well,
oddest thing, because it was kind of it's like an eyeball, because it looks like it's got really bad cataracts.
oh, I had a hunch you'd have a good story about that one, and a sheep's eyeball might be the best answer we've had so far. What's the book that you recommend the most?
Stephen Fry has done the best job so far of making Greek mythology accessible with his Mythos trilogy, Mythos, Heroes, and Troy. Even if you have no interest in Greek mythology, you will love these books.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I'm reading Troy at the moment. I picked it up in an airport thinking, oh, Stephen Fry. And it is very accessible Greek mythology, and he sort of takes you through it. So, last one of these. What's the strangest job that you've ever done?
Strangest? I've had some really crap jobs. At the time, it was strange. Now, it's not. So I'm a recovering engineer. I did an engineering degree, but before I did an art degree. So I scared everyone and pretended I was going to become an artist, and went off to Chelsea School of Art. And during that time, I would take any jobs as I could to pay my way through college. And a girlfriend of mine who had gone straight into the workforce, didn't go to college, worked at British Telecom. And she got me a job walking around London with a massive battery pack and receiver and a handset, walking around London saying, "Can you hear me now?"
Really? Testing the reception.
So now that doesn't seem so strange, but think about 1989 and this poor kid from South London walking around with this thing yelling, "Hello?" So at the time, it was really peculiar.
Certainly, it was odd. Yeah, car phones at that point were literally, you'd have to carry them out of the car, where a great big battery pack. So totally remember that. Our next section is called Fired Up 5, which is our quickfire round. Take it away, Ian.
Yes, now quick answers to this group, all right? 1 or 2 sentences at most. Okay, what's the best career advice you were ever given?
Famous industrial designer called Richard Seymour said to me, "Don't fire out hundreds of resumes. Pick the company you want to work for and make them hire you."
That's a good one. What would you do if you weren't in marketing?
I really, really love construction. I think this is part of my engineering roots. I love to build.
Builder Nuri, what's the tool you can't do your job without?
I apologize, but it is ChatGPT. I'm now fully, productivity-wise, quality of work, I am addicted. I cannot do my work without it.
So I think I might know the answer to our next question then. What hot trend have you got your eye on? AI plus what?
I think it's the body. I think it's the human, how we augment the human condition. I think that could be physical. We're already seeing some really, suddenly, incredible advancements in things like kneecap replacement, and the tools that are creating them are advanced technology. I don't much like the idea of the sort of Ray Kurzweil idea of a chip being implanted in my head, and I sort of imagine a Google search and it tells me. But I do love the idea of us being able to measure more effectively what's going on with our bodies and our minds. This brings me sort of full circle back to EMOTIV. But I think the next thing is the sort of biohacking, measurement, and measurement being the first, like really effective measurement of what's going on. We'll see this in the next version of this as well, right? Blood pressure and God knows whatever else is going to be in it. AI plus the actual devices to measure personal health.
Yep. Either personally or professionally, what is your single biggest goal for 2024?
My biggest goal is related to EMOTIV. As a first mover in the non-invasive brain monitoring technology arena, the goal is to re-establish them as the most important brand in the market. And I think AI has a big role to play. It has to. I mean, EMOTIV has probably the largest independent database of brain data, has all of the ingredients of being a really, really important company. It already is, but I think accelerating growth in the second half of the year. So my biggest goals professionally are wrapped around accelerating the growth, the impact, the usefulness of the EMOTIV platform. Personally, I set myself this goal every year, but I think this year more than ever, and it's to create a quality existence and invest heavily in good people, the people that I love, but also the good people around me. And I think this sort of is the intersection into professional. I believe that good people need to stick together and work together because there's a lot of bad actors in this world. And I'm lucky I know a lot of really, really great people. And I would like to invest more in those people, like your good selves.
Oh, very good. No, that's a great mission. I agree with that. And I agree on the impact of EMOTIV. So Nuri Djavit, you're the CXO of EMOTIV. Thank you for coming on FiredUp. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, where should they go?
My social media use is narrowed. I'm a voyeur on Meta's platforms, but don't really get involved. But LinkedIn is my focus. So LinkedIn is usually the best way to get in touch.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time today. Really learned a lot about building a community. It was great to catch up.
Always enjoy speaking to you guys. I've loved listening to the podcast.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Well, that about wraps it up for today. But before we close, we did want to offer all of our Fired Up friends a chance to grab a mega pack of all of our ebooks and guides. That's our guide to content marketing. That's our startup guide to paid media using Google Ads. It's our guide to attribution. You can get all of those, over 100 pages of goodness, at firebrand.marketing/firedup freebies. That's freebies with an S. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts or drop us a note at firebrand.marketing. And as ever, the details of how to get in touch with our guest today can be found in the show notes. Thank you for listening. And until next week, get out there and crush your marketing goals.